Madam President.
Mr. Majority Leader.
Madam President, first, let me welcome you and all of my colleagues back to the Senate. I hope everyone had a wonderful Thanksgiving, surrounded by loved ones and a lot of good food. For the Schumer household, the Thanksgiving holiday this year is a bittersweet occasion. It was 1 year ago this past week that we said goodbye to my father, Abe Schumer, after a very long and rich life. Not a day goes by that I don't miss him, and to celebrate my first Thanksgiving without him at the table is a reminder to never take the blessings of life for granted. But life goes on, the circles of life go on, and we also celebrated my 4-year-old grandson's birthday on the day before Thanksgiving as well. So the generations continue, but my father's memory is with us. Now, on anti-Semitism. Before I begin the substance of my remarks on the floor, I want to say a few things about the disgusting news that came out of Mar-A-Lago over the Thanksgiving break. Last week, it was reported that Donald Trump, the former President of the United States and Republican standard-bearer, had dinner at Mar-A-Lago with a notorious bigot who fancies himself a leading thinker on the extreme edges of the hard right, embracing everything from white nationalism to anti-Semitism to outright Holocaust denial. For a former president to sit down and have dinner with a high-profile anti-Semite is disgusting and dangerous. To give an anti-Semite even the smallest platform, much less an audience over dinner, is pure evil. Even assuming the former president didn't realize Mr. Fuentes was coming to Mar-A-Lago, for him to refuse to condemn Fuentes and his bigoted words after the dinner is appalling and it is dangerous. Now, I'm glad that some of the former president's friends and allies, particularly those in the Jewish community, are pushing him to do the right thing by condemning this vicious anti-Semite, since the former president does not seem to have the honor, the decency, the humanity to do it on his own. I vociferously condemn the former president's decision to meet with this anti-Semite and urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to do the same. On respect for marriage, as the Senate gavels back into session for the final session of the 117th Congress, there's a lot we must do before the end of the calendar year. Many of these things will require Republican cooperation to get done. First, the Senate begins this week by picking up where we left off on the Respect for Marriage Act. As a reminder, this chamber voted 62 to 37 before Thanksgiving to move forward on this bill, with 12 Republicans in favor. The Senate is scheduled to hold the next procedural vote later this afternoon. And in the meantime, both sides are continuing working together on an agreement to move this bill quickly through the chamber. I hope we can get it done with all due speed, because millions of Americans deserve equal justice under the law and peace of mind knowing their right to marry the person they love is protected. Taking a step back, it's notable that the Senate is having this debate to begin with. A decade ago, it would have strained all of our imaginations to envision both sides talking about protecting the rights of same-sex married couples. America does move forward, although sometimes in difficult ways, and sometimes it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but today is a big step forward. We all know that for all the progress, though, we've made on same-sex marriage, the rights of all married couples will never truly be safe without the proper protections under federal law. And that's why the Respect for Marriage Act is necessary. And as I've said many times, this legislation is deeply personal to many of us in this chamber, myself included. Passing this bill is our chance to send a message to Americans everywhere. No matter who you are or who you love, you too deserve dignity and equal treatment under the law. That's about as American ideal as it comes. And so I hope the Senate can finish the work we've started and pass the Respect for Marriage Act as soon as possible. Now, on government funding. Once the Senate passes respect for marriage, there's a lot on the to-do list that we must cross off before the end of the calendar year. Chief among them, of course, is working together to fund the government by December 16th. Failure to act by then will result in a pointless and painful government shutdown, right as the holiday season kicks into high gear. The best option for avoiding a shutdown, of course, is for Republicans to work with us on an omnibus, ensuring the federal government is fully prepared to serve the public in the next fiscal year. A continuing resolution, on the other hand, is far less desirable for many reasons. A CR would cause grave harm to our troops in uniform at a time when national defense is critical. With Russian aggression in Europe and China's aggression in the Indo-Pacific, the last thing we can afford right now is to turn government funding into another political tit-for-tat. Government funding should rise above politics when the well-being of our troops and our national defense is on the line. Just this morning, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin wrote to congressional leaders explaining why a CR is the wrong solution for national defense. It will not only cost our military billions every month, it will also freeze new investments in critical military infrastructure. It will mean many staffing and personnel decisions will be put on hold. When we see some of the advances some of our competitors, China and Russia, have made in military equipment, we can't afford to sit still. That's what a CR would do. We would just sit still as others gain on us. As China continues to dial up its saber rattling over Taiwan, a CR will doom the Department of Defense's hopes of beginning new strategic initiatives in the Indo-Pacific region. To quote Secretary Austin, "We can't outcompete China with our hands tied behind our back 3, 5, or 6 months every fiscal year." He's absolutely right. I hope my Republican colleagues are listening. The best gift Congress can give our troops is certainty. Certainty of resources, certainty of purpose, and certainty that Congress will act to give our military service members the tools they need to keep us safe. The only way that will happen is by Congress working together to pass an omnibus bill in the coming weeks. Now, on the NDAA, as the United States Senate works on passing government funding, we must also work on a bipartisan basis to pass our national defense bill, too. For more than 6 decades, Congress has faithfully passed the NDAA on a bipartisan, bicameral basis, and I expect this year will be no different. But today I want to highlight one of the many reasons that passing the NDA is especially important. We need to stay tough on the Chinese government and its actions. Last month, I introduced an amendment to the NDAA with Senator Cornyn that will prohibit the U.S. government from doing business with companies that rely on certain Chinese chip makers that the Pentagon has labeled Chinese government military contractors. National security leaders have weighed in support of this amendment because they know it keeps our country safe. To this day, many Chinese companies have well-known ties to the Chinese Communist Party and continue to sell microchips to U.S. businesses that have contracts with the federal government. That poses serious risks to Americans' privacy and national security. The main idea here is simple. If American business wants the federal government to buy their products or services, they shouldn't be using the kind of Chinese-made chips that, because of Chinese government involvement, put our national security at risk. We need our government and our economy to rely on chips made right here in America, something my amendment, along with Senator Cornyn, would encourage. Many on both sides rightfully like to talk about staying tough on the Chinese government. Our amendment would do just that. I urge my colleagues to support my amendment and urge all of us to work quickly to pass the NDAA when the time comes next month. I yield the floor and note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Baldwin.